You get the most out of an environment. You can do the most things and fun and be creative when you have all sorts of variables, all sorts of different things in it, things that can change, things that you can move, things that you can build with. Yeah. So that sparks the creativity.
Hi, this is Rusty Keeler, and you're listening to the Play Nature Podcast, where we talk about play, nature, playing in nature, and the nature of play. I'm glad you're here. Let's have a listen.
All right. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I'll be talking about loose parts. Loose parts for outdoor play. Yeah, one of my favorite things. So, today, I'm at a new spot because Ithaca has been having these massive rainstorms, and the creek was so high today that I couldn't even get to my spot. Yeah, exciting. So, I'm up a little ways from the creek. If you listen carefully, you can hear it. There it is. And yeah, I'm in a nice little spot in the woods, and that's kind of fun too. And I'm seeing all the things that come up, the new things that are coming up out of the ground. Mayapples and trilliums and other, there's ferns that are unfurling out of the ground. Pretty fun. And that's the beauty of nature and the seasons and spring, that there's all this different stuff happening. And so we want that stuff in our children's environments too, right? Celebrate the seasons. Today we're going to be celebrating loose parts for play. Lots of fun stuff to talk about. And at the end, I'll answer your questions about loose parts, including what are some of my favorite loose parts, kind of what are the basic loose parts, and what's the average cost of doing loose parts. Well, here's a spoiler alert. You can do them cheaply and even free. But we'll get to that. First of all, what are loose parts? Loose parts, the stuff, bringing the stuff to your outdoor space. And it could be boards and traffic cones, hula hoops, plastic dinosaurs, balls, straw bales, tires, that kind of stuff, for creative play. Now, as we think about this, first let's do a little thought exercise. And I want you to imagine a classroom. Think about a nice classroom, maybe a preschool classroom or a kindergarten classroom. And think that the classroom is beautiful. The room itself is beautiful. And there's beautiful furniture. There's nice big windows. The color of the walls are soothing. There's shelving. There's storage, there's a carpet, there's a sink, all sorts of great stuff. But what if there was no stuff on those shelves? What if there were no dress-up clothes, or no blocks, building blocks, or no plastic dinosaurs, no books, no art materials, no paper, no pens, no snacks, no stuff in that classroom? Just the furniture? How weird would that be, right? Who would do that? Nobody. But why do we do that for the outdoor space? Huh? Yeah, so many times people think, okay, the outdoors, we'll put some playground equipment out there, we'll have the proper safety fall zone according to federal safety guidelines, and we'll call it good. And it could be good. But it's not great unless you have loose parts. Loose parts will make it great. And loose parts can make any yard great. No matter how big, how small, how natural, or how man-made. If you add loose materials to your yard, you will boost your children's outdoor play and learning. Their creativity will flow in new ways that will amaze you. their communication with other children, their collaboration with other children, their construction skills, their ideas, their fun. Because children get to have control over their environment. They get to change their environment. And just like the indoors, they get to build with blocks and play with plastic dinosaurs and figures. And stories happen, journeys, imaginations, roaming free with the stuff that they create. And the outdoors needs it too. And, just like the indoors, we think that there's benefits. There's benefits to blocks. There's benefits to magnet tiles. Well, there's benefits for children for outdoor play with loose parts too. And, I've said it before, I'll say it again. For me, play for play's sake is good enough. I know that's the way. Play is the way. Play is how we learn, grow, become who we are, express ourselves. And it's good enough for me. I want to support play. There's a billion things going on. Their hearts, minds, bodies, spirits, their brains, their bodies, their muscles, their bones, their synapses, their emotional states. All sorts of things are happening. They're growing. They're coming online. They're exploring the world and finding out who they are. And they do that through play. And loose parts really help them do it. Now, at the same time, it's important to believe in that. But it's often also important to be able to talk and communicate why you're doing things like that with children, why you're having loose parts, why you got beat up pots and pans out there, why you have scrap lumber, why your playground might not look all shiny like a big fancy piece of playground equipment. You have mud and shovels and marbles and plastic dinosaurs in the mud. Why are you doing that? So we put the words to it. And so the benefits. And so, again, the beauty of play is that it checks all the boxes, right? If you're talking to administration, if you're talking to parents, what their goals are and their hopes are for their children, if you're talking to licensing and what their concerns are, if you're talking to other staff who are maybe new to the idea of loose parts, it's important to be able to communicate that. I feel like that's kind of the state that we're in now, is thinking about how to communicate these things that we believe in. So with loose parts, it's good for cognitive development. Get ready. Here comes a big list. Cognitive development, problem solving, critical thinking, spatial awareness. As they're building with things and sticking them in the ground and trying stuff out and seeing how things work structurally, their ideas, geometry patterns, measurement, comparative thinking, scientific exploration, social and emotional development, cooperation, empathy, conflict resolution when you're working with materials out there, self-expression, self-confidence. I can do this. I can build this. Emotional regulation, independence, responsibility over your materials, physical development, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, strength and endurance, sensory development, language and communication, vocabulary expansion, narrative skills, listening skills. As children are giving and taking, working together on projects. There's time management, planning and organization, time awareness. Oh, one more minute. There's only one more minute till we go in. All right, I gotta hurry up and keep building and wrap it up. Social skills, friendship building, teamwork, negotiation, communication skills, creativity and imagination, resourcefulness, independence and decision making, autonomy, resilience and risk management. So there's risk taking and flexibility. All in all, a ton of good stuff. And all that could happen with a couple of tires, some boards, and plastic dinosaurs, and shovels. Yeah, or anything that you can think up. So, here's a story for you about an aha moment in my life as a designer. I started off doing fixed playground equipment. That's how I got my start in the play world, was designing for it. And I was designing fixed equipment, and I was loving it. I was tapping my creativity and drawing ideas and building little models and then building full-scale mock-ups for children to try and then coming up with, finished products to go in schools and stuff. And one day I was having lunch, and the marketing director was reading a book by Dr. Joe Frost called Play and Playscapes, and he was reading a chapter about adventure playgrounds. And I'll do more podcasts about adventure playgrounds because I really love them now. But I was sort of new to them then. And adventure playgrounds, in short, are kind of these wild and woolly, loose part playgrounds, especially coming from Europe. After World War II, kids are building their own playgrounds and saws and hammers and scrap lumber, building their own forts, and cooking over fires, and having animals and nature and gardens and all sorts of great stuff. And the marketing director shut the book, looked at me solemnly, and said, "I don't even know why we're doing play equipment. These are the best playgrounds for children." And I was like, "What? Young designer getting into design equipment? What do you mean?" And what he meant was, these environments, they've got the pizzazz. They've got the endless possibilities. They can match children's creativity. They can make room for children's creativity. Children can build their own spaces. They can change their own spaces. They can destroy their own spaces. With fixed playground equipment, they can only use the stuff, sort of, how it was made to be used, right? I came to realize, that as the designer, I had, the most flexibility and fun and creativity playing with the ideas, sketching things out, changing the ideas, and, trying things out, making stuff. And then once it was done, stand back and the children could use it. But they couldn't change it. So we want children's spaces that have the most open-ended, endless possibilities. And loose parts do that. Have you ever heard the theory of loose parts? Yes. There's a famous article written in Landscape Architect magazine back in 1971 by Simon Nicholson. And it's about loose parts. And he was lobbying for, and he was kind of making that same case, that all people are creative, right? It's not just the designers and the architects and the planners. All people have the spark of creativity in them. They just don't always have the opportunities to change their environment, to play with ideas, to play with their environment. And so he was lobbying for environments that are flexible, that have loose stuff. His article was called "How Not to Cheat Children: The Theory of Loose Parts." And the the famous quote pulled out of that is, "In any environment, both the degree of inventiveness and creativity and the possibility of discovery are directly proportional to the number and kinds of variables in it." In other words, you get the most out of an environment, you can do the most things and fun and be creative when you have all sorts of variables, all sorts of different things in it, things that can change, things that you can move, things that you can build with. Yeah. So that sparks the creativity, the inventiveness. And so that's what we want for our children's spaces, right? If we're promoting play and connection to the outdoors. Yes. So, jumping ahead, being inspired by that, and being inspired by the adventure playgrounds, I helped start an adventure playground inspired place called the Hands on Nature Anarchy Zone at Ithaca Children's Garden here in Ithaca. And it's a wild and woolly, rough and tumble place filled with loose materials. It's big dirt mounds and tunnels, trees to climb, boulders, but it's filled also with tires and boards and branches and shovels, rope, magnifying glasses, all sorts of stuff. And it's this idea that it is this open-ended, loose parts place filled with those variables. A friend of mine was doing her PhD research project, and she looked at the Anarchy Zone. She wanted to study the Anarchy Zone and that kind of play. So she juxtaposed, she looked at a group of children at a summer camp playing at the Anarchy Zone, and then she also observed that same group of children on their traditional play equipment playground at the school, where that was kind of their headquarters. And what she found was at the Anarchy Zone, children were engaged. And they were engaged for hours. Like, they would go there for 2 hours, and they would be engaged the whole time. Digging in the dirt, building forts with boards, moving water around in 5-gallon buckets in teams because it's heavy. They're building their own zip lines. They're climbing trees. They're, going through the tunnels. They're doing all sorts of stuff endlessly. The counselors that were with them, the adults, just stood on the sidelines or sat on the picnic table and said, hey, we don't even have to do anything when we're here. The children are so engaged. And then looking at that same group of children on the traditional playground, they would come out and they would be engaged on that play equipment for 20 minutes. 20 minutes, kind of as a rule, almost every time. When the clock struck 20, after swinging on the swings, and climbing the equipment, and doing the monkey bars, and spinning, and all the stuff that the play equipment was allowing you to do, after 20 minutes, there would start to be conflict. There would start to be injuries. There's a scarcity of materials, maybe 2 basketballs, so there would be arguments over that, conflict over that, and then children, after that 20 minutes of using the play equipment that it was the way it was kind of designed to be used, they would start using it in ways it was not designed to be used. Climbing to higher things and falling off. So getting hurt. So loose parts, play spaces, endless possibilities, fully engaged. Traditional play equipment, a certain amount of time. Now, as an aside, we think about the average recess time, and it probably is 20 minutes, right, at the average elementary school, which that's a whole subject, sad subject on its own that we'll get into later podcast. So the equipment works for that 20 minutes. But when we are talking about engaging children's play and creativity and supporting them the best we can, we want, of course, longer time outside, and we want the loose parts for full engagement. So, what do you think? Can you do some loose parts? And in my normal spirit of dreaming big, starting small, and never stopping, you can do that with loose parts. Yeah, so you can dream it up. Maybe you want an Anarchy Zone with all sorts of stuff, adventure playground style, kids are building, doing wild stuff. But you don't have to do it all at once. Start small. Pick the first couple things that you put out there. Even cardboard boxes. Yeah, doesn't matter if you have a natural play space or if you have a man-made play equipment with rubber surfacing, you put some cardboard boxes out there and the play will change. If you stand back, if you really commit to it and say, all right, we're going to watch the play, we're going to let things go. And it could be big cardboard boxes like refrigerator boxes, or it could just be a whole batch of classic Amazon boxes. Just put it out there and see what happens. Observe. Make notes. And then think, okay, the next day, what do you add to it? Oh, maybe we'll add paint. Maybe we'll add a blanket. Or pillows. Or who knows what. All right. Now it's time for questions. So, here's a question. What are some basic loose parts that you recommend getting for small home-based childcare? And that's the beauty of loose parts. They're good for all children's environments. Yes, public parks. Yes, elementary schools. Yes, big childcare centers. And yes, small home-based childcare centers too. So, another beauty of loose parts is that there's no perfect loose part or nothing that you have to have. Anything will do. So it's really up to you what you can get your hands on. But here's some of my favorites. As stated previously, the cardboard box. Yeah. Cardboard box. Scrap lumber. Boards. 2x4s. 2x4s cut to different lengths. You can sand the edge smooth if you want, if there's any little areas when you cut it, when they're cut. And of course, kitchen stuff. Pots, pans, colanders, spoons for digging. All that stuff is great. Turkey basters, shovels. Yes, dig the hole. Find a corner in your yard and dig the hole. Traffic cones. Tires. Now, in my online course, I go in kind of depth about safety around tires and how to use them, but quickly drill holes in the sidewalls, let the water out, and scrub them down with soap and water when you first get them. And it's better to get old tires, not new tires. Fabric, tablecloths, blankets, tarps, sails. How about marbles, little jewels? One of my favorite child care centers here in Ithaca has all these little jewels, and they sprinkle them out throughout the yard, and children just come upon them throughout the day or different days, and they find them and collect them, and then they spread them out too. It just becomes part of the play. Branches. Maybe there's some branches that have fallen in your neighborhood, or people are taking some trees down, so you can get some nice branches. Sand off any pokey parts. And straw bales. I love me some straw bales. You can get 4 or 5 of them, have a nice reading circle, or stack them up, like kids stack them up for a little tower, or you could make obstacle courses, or they could just be random benches around, or, who knows, children pushing them and pulling them and lugging them around together. It takes cooperation because they're kind of bulky. You're getting in gross motor skills. Yeah. So again, it doesn't take fancy stuff. Which leads me to the next question. What is the average cost of adding loose parts? I'm glad you asked that question. The average cost is $51.32 on average. I'm just kidding. I don't know. There is no average. And in fact, I think the best loose parts are the ones you can get cheaply or the ones you can get free. Free. So the average cost could be 0. So 0 could be looking in your kitchen cabinet for those frying pans and putting out the word to your people to see if they have any extra frying pans or kitchen stuff if they're weeding out their kitchen. There's always a few pots and pans that are ready for that mud kitchen. And it could be maybe you have a connection with a farmer who has straw bales. But I'm all about looking at your community. Now, cheaply, to get things cheaply, you could go to secondhand stores, do a little shopping. Here in Ithaca, we have the reuse store. It's kind of like a Salvation Army or a Goodwill store. So you can find all sorts of goodies. You can imagine how children would play with them. And then also thinking about your community. Where you can get stuff. Like, where could you get 100 used tennis balls? How about a tennis club in your town? Or how about the high school tennis team? When they're done, they use tennis balls. They like the fresh ones out of the can. And so they practice with their tennis balls. But at some point, they get old. And they get rid of them. But if they knew you wanted them, if they knew you'd take them, you could get them. And the same goes for high school soccer teams. They get rid of their balls. You don't need brand new ones. You don't want to pay for brand new ones. And even if you had ones that were squishy, right? If you're just using them to play, children are using them in different ways than the varsity soccer team might use them. Same with footballs. Same with sails. You could contact a local sailboat shop or sailing club. Get some sails that could be used too. So it's really thinking about your community. I love that with building natural play spaces, and it's thinking about where you can get stuff, materials from your community. But the same goes for loose parts. And with that, I'll leave you with the idea, and I'll leave you with the idea of dreaming big and starting small with loose parts. And in the show notes, I have my free outdoor loose parts guide. Lots of good stuff in there. And a link to my online course, my outdoor loose parts online course that walks you through the what, the where, and the how. What loose parts are, where you can get them. You can go on a shopping spree with me, a virtual shopping spree, and the how. How do you store them? How do you use them? How do you put them out? How do you manage them? How do you put them away? How do you make sure they're safe? So I go through all that stuff. And in the show notes, there'll also be a special discount code for you podcast listener. Yay! All right. Well, with that, dream it big, start it small, never stop. Good luck with your loose parts adventures. And as always, if you have any questions, you can email me at playnaturepodcast@gmail.com. And also, you can share your loose part stories or send me pictures of the endless creativity that is flowing in your outdoor space. All right, till next time, play well.
All right. Thanks for listening. Do you have a comment or a question? Email me at playnaturepodcast@gmail.com. You know I like talking about this stuff. And maybe we could use your question on a future podcast episode. As always, I have some free goodies for you in the show notes, including my outdoor loose parts guide. Fun stuff in there. And so I wish you the best in your outdoor play adventures. And when it comes to adding nature to your yard, or loose parts, or saying yes to risky play, my favorite motto is dream big, start small, and never stop. Oh yeah. Woo 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 woo. Let's do it. All right. Have fun out there.